still coming, so maybe we will still wait 1 minute.
Yeah, it's just like a real conference.
Yes. So my name is Kata, and I welcome you on behalf of the NYESZE. And I want to introduce our host, Prescott, and there will be a question and answer session at the end if everything works fine, and enjoy the meeting.
Okay, thank you very much, Kata. And welcome to my session. First of all, I'd like to say just a little bit about myself. I have two jobs. So I work with Euroexam. So this is a session sponsored by Euroexam, and I work on the test development team in Euroexam. But I also work full-time at FIGYELEM University, and I am a methodology teacher, trainee teacher, and language development teacher. So I'll be wearing both hats today. And I'm going to talk about today mainly the question of how to help students prepare for online exams, because online exams have become an important part of our new reality. And what I shall say will be broadly in 4 stages. So there'll be 4 parts to the talk. I'll start off with a little bit of theory, not too much, but you know, being a bit of a nerd or having a university applied linguistics background, I would like to start with just a little bit of theory. Then I'll talk about online versus face-to-face oral communication and what the differences are and the pros and cons. And then I'll talk about our learners and their experience of online communication. And finally, at the end, or in the last quarter or so, I'll give a few ideas for some practical activities online for helping our students prepare for online communication, particularly the kind of tasks that they have to do in online exams. So without further ado, let me share my screen and we can begin. Right, good. So I hope you can see my title slide. Great. And so, as I said, we're going to begin with a little bit of theory, nothing too nasty. So we're going to start off looking at a model of communication. I think you are quite likely to be familiar with this model. This model applies to any sort of communication, but of course, today we're interested in oral communication. So what happens when we are in a conversation? We have a message. First of all, we encode that message into words, which we then produce. And yes, it goes through a channel. In the case of a face-to-face face-to-face conversation, that channel is basically the air, because that's how words are carried. When our interlocutor, to use a big sort of academic word, the person we're talking to, okay, when they hear what we say, they decode the sounds and the message is conveyed. What else is important to know about this model of communication? Well, feedback. Feedback is very important. It's something that's going to come up again and again as we move through the talk. So in face-to-face conversations, the feedback is immediate, almost instantaneous. That's how conversation, we all know this is how conversations proceed. We listen to what the other person says, and almost before they finished, and sometimes before they've finished, we are giving feedback. That is natural. That's almost instinctive to oral face-to-face communication. There is one other element of this model of communication which is very important, and that is something called noise. Now, what is noise? Noise is something that can interfere with the communication. Now, it could literally be noise. So you've all had the experience that trying to talk to someone when there's, for instance, a loud radio on, or in the street when, as frequently happens in Budapest, men are digging a hole in the road. This is difficult. But noise can also be in other forms. Noise can be psychological noise. For instance, now I'm quite nervous because this is the first time that I've ever given a conference talk online, which is kind of ironic when I'm talking about online communication. That's a kind of noise because it might interfere with my ability to communicate clearly. Also, noise can be physical in the sense that if we are very tired, and this affects us, I think we all know this when we're using a second language. When we're tired, we tend to make much more mistakes and everything's much more difficult. So noise can interfere with the process of communication, and different kinds of noise can interfere with it. One further important kind of noise which can interfere with communication in a second language context is communication breakdown, which can be due to misunderstandings, or when we cannot think of a word or an expression or how to say something. This can also, in effect, interfere with what we want to say. Okay, a little more theory. The idea of communicative competence is a very wide, it's widespread and it's important. Again, you may be aware of this. I'm just going to explain it very briefly. It basically, the idea of communicative competence is because of the man on the left. Now, I don't know whether you recognize this man. His name is Noam Chomsky, and he is a very famous linguist. He's now the old man of linguistics. This is a recent photo of him. And Noam Chomsky was one of the first linguists to argue that our ability to learn language was innate. In other words, we were born with certain pre-programmed abilities which enabled us to learn a language very easily, a bit like we learn to walk when we're babies. And he talked about linguistic competence, and what he was interested here was what is this ability and how is it represented in our brain? And he talks about linguistic competence, and he also talks about performance, but he wasn't really interested in performance. He was only interested in what's going on in our brains. So he didn't really have anything very much to say about how we actually use the language that we acquire. Now, the second picture, unfortunately, this linguist and sociologist and anthropologist is no longer with us. This is Del Hymes. Now, Del Hymes reacted to Chomsky's division of linguistic knowledge and performance because he was interested in orality. He actually studied Indian communities in Seattle in America, and he was interested in oral cultures, and he realized that there was a lot more to language use than just performance. So he came up with the concept of communicative competence to describe the skills and knowledge that we need to communicate in language effectively. So this is, of course, very important for our learners as well. And actually, this idea of communicative competence is what the so-called communicative approach is based on. So I'm sure you've heard of the communicative approach. Hymes' original idea was later developed by other researchers, particularly a man called Michael Canali, into 4 distinct skill areas. And I think these skill areas, even though this dates back 4 decades, still give a good description of the skill areas that our students need to be good at in order to be good communicators orally in their second language. So what are these 4 competencies? Well, the first one we are all familiar with, perhaps a bit too familiar with, and that is grammatical competence. What that means is the knowledge of all the rules of the language, how the language works in terms of structures. It's covered by what we now know as syntax, semantics, morphology, maybe phonetics as well. All of these things come under grammatical competence, but that on its own is not enough. So if this is all we teach in the classroom, it's not enough, because when you use a language, or when our learners use the language, they need to know how to use it in different situations with different people, and that is socio-linguistic competence. So this is how you talk to different people in different situations. That is equally important. And also discourse competence. Discourse competence is about how you put different kinds of texts together. And here we have to understand texts. If we're talking about speaking, a text is not something that's written. A text is a kind of conversation or interaction. For instance, we need to understand that we compose texts differently if we're giving a talk at a conference to if we go to the kochma and we start a conversation with the person standing next to us. That's a very different kind of text. So this is part of discourse competence, knowing how to put language together to make different texts. And the final competence relates to what I've already said about noise, because this is strategic competence. And this is the competence we need when when our learners meet with problems. It can be caused by insufficient language. It can be caused by inaccuracy. It can be caused by just not being able to remember a key word. So they need, or not understanding something that the person they're talking to says. So strategic competence involves what to do when there are communication breakdowns. So here's a little test for you. I'm just going to open the chat box so I can see. Now, I'm going to give you some bits of language, and I want you to tell me which competence these bits of language are connected to. So here is the first one, and you can write the answer in the chat box, okay? So here's the first one. Once upon a time, there was a little girl who was so sweet. Oh, I can't see that because I'm going to have to move. Yeah, sweet and kind, that everyone loved her. Her grandmother, who loved her more than anyone, gave her a little cap made of red velvet. So what's the competence which this piece of language demonstrates? Of course, if this was in Hungarian, it wouldn't be once upon a time. Yeah, that's right. It's discourse. Well done, Jeff. This is discourse competence because this is a fairy story, and this is how we tell fairy stories in English. It's a very well-known fairy story. I'm sure you know which one it is. Okay, the second one. Yesterday, I went to the city park. So, tegnap mentem a Városligetbe. Városligetre. I'm not quite sure what my endings are there. Yeah, it's grammatical competence. That's right. Yes, because there's a mistake there. So that indicates a problem with an irregular verb in this case. Okay, third one. I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch that. Could you say it again? Okay, the odds are pretty good now. So yeah, this is strategic competence. Yeah, there's been some sort of breakdown. In this case, possibly there was actually some noise, or, well, I mean, this sort of thing happens all the time in online communication, which we'll come to in a minute. And yeah, no prizes for guessing what the last one is, but I'll show it to you anyway. So, good evening, officer. Could I just say before you tell me how fast I was going that I think you look really sexy in uniform. Okay, so this one is obviously not what to say if you get stopped for speeding. Yeah, so this is socio-linguistic. That's right. Yeah. I mean, you could try it, but I wouldn't advise it with Hungarian policemen or policewomen. I don't drive, so it's never happened to me. Okay, so thank you. Let's move on. So all of these skills are important for communication to proceed effectively. when we move online, well, maybe there's some extra elements that we need to be aware of. First of all, let's compare online communication with face-to-face communication, because not everything, I mean, we might think that obviously it's much better to be face-to-face, but it's not completely one-sided. So for instance, if you look at online, there are some quite big advantages, and we are enjoying one of those advantages right now, because we are all, I think, in our homes, probably in our living rooms. So location is not an issue and distance is not an issue. Plus, we cut down on cost of travel and time of travel. And if we want, we can communicate at any time. So we can communicate, for instance, as I was communicating a couple of days ago with someone in California, talking to her about the election, which was then going on. And for her, the time was, let me see, the time was the middle of the day, so early afternoon. For me, it was evening time. And yeah, it's relatively cheap as well. And it can be a lot more convenient. Of course, face-to-face, I think we're well aware of that. Face-to-face has a lot of advantages. People are often better prepared. I'm not sure. I mean, I think you can be well prepared for online communication as well. But familiarity and personal location and the immediate environment being shared by everybody is, I think, a big advantage there. Another advantage is body language, because although with online communication, we can see each other's faces and expression, I mean, you can't really see, we use gesture, and I'm using gesture, but you can't really see it. So body language and gestures are much easier to see in face-to-face. Misunderstandings are less likely. Feedback is instant. So feedback is something that's very important with the difference between face-to-face and online. And there tend to be stronger personal bonds as well. Let's take a closer look at the difficulties that we might experience online. Now, I'm going to show you a short video. And this is a video, it's intentionally supposed to be funny. It's what a business meeting would be like if it was an online call in real life, if you see what I mean. So the online call is imagined as taking place in a real location to highlight some of the problems with online meetings. Just to remind you, the situation is, this is what a business meeting would be like in real life if the same conditions applied in real life as when you have a meeting online. And what I would like you to do is to watch the video and try to spot as many of the problems which you can see in the video as possible. So what are the problems which the person holding the meeting and the people in the meeting experience during this meeting? These are online problems, of course. So here we go.
Trip Crosby
has joined the meeting.
Beth
has joined the meeting.
Hello?
Tyler?
No, this is Beth from ICS.
Oh, hey, Beth. How are you doing?
Oh, good. Yeah. Just making it, you know.
Tyler?
Has joined the meeting.
All right, well, this is Trip. Who's here? Tyler's here.
Beth's here.
Okay, the purpose of today's meeting is to discuss the...
Yeah, I'll be able to do it in like 30 minutes. John?
Has joined the meeting.
Hi, John.
Hi.
I was just trying to go over the purpose of today's meeting, which is to discuss the Tyler?
has joined the meeting.
Sorry, guys, I got cut off. Is Paul here? Send him an invite.
Put in your access code.
No, that's your PIN number.
It should be a 9-digit number.
Try pressing the pound key. Paul.
Has joined the meeting.
Any questions before we move on?
Yes, this is Beth. What's our best plan of attack for the second quarter?
Question
What
actually.
we should do. Oh,
Go ahead.
Oh, I think what we should do.
It
is
actually
really
depends on
diversify.
how you look at it, because the
really come.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. I think
Given
what we-
sales,
what we
we're at
really-
a...
Let me just say that.
Okay.
That's a great graph, John. Tyler?
Well, my main concern with the projections from last year was that they're just insufficient. I mean, they're not even taking into account.
Did we lose Tyler again?
Hello?
John, are you guys taking distributions? John?
Oh, my bad. I was on mute. Let me start over.
So I've prepared a presentation. I'm sharing it with all of you. You should be able to see it on your screen right now.
Got it.
I don't see a link anywhere.
It says I need to download a plugin.
We are all using Macs, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
How can you, of course?
Financials are looking great. Paul, do you have any comments on staffing?
I was thinking about that because we get a few more contractor types in. Hold on, I'm sorry. Rex, get down!
I don't know. I feel like when I look at the numbers from last quarter, that you could really tell a huge difference. So if we were to really tighten that up, then I don't
To me, staffing is a huge impact.
Is that?
Is that me? Is that me?
It's not me. I don't think.
I just want to go over a couple of details as we move into our next section here. We got 3 new departments coming on board.
I'm breaking up a little bit, guys.
By the end of Q3.
Driving to a dead
I need
spot.
everyone to give me detailed evaluations each
Sorry,
month
guys.
so that we know. That's it, guys. Beth, you'll send out a recap email that could have basically taken the place of this whole meeting, correct?
Yep, always do.
Yeah, thanks for doing that, Beth. Dave, you been here the whole time? Yeah. Huh. Well, thanks everyone once again. Oh, one more.
All right, and I would like you just to quickly write in the chat box what were some of the problems that you noticed very quickly. Yeah, so there were technical problems, all sorts of different technical problems. Yeah, and inhibited people, yeah. Okay, anything else? Yes, I've participated in many meetings like that. Yeah, talking simultaneously, which is an interesting one because that's to do with feedback, and feedback is much more difficult online. Unmute. I hope I'm unmuted. Yeah. Okay. Cannot log in. Yeah. And of course, there was actual noise as well in different ways. Yeah, the dog and the coffee machine and so on. Yeah, okay. So I'm going to move on. I think we've probably all experienced some or all of those, and I've experienced those because all of my teaching has been online since March. So I haven't taught a face-to-face class for several months, 8 months or something like that. So I've experienced all those in my classes. Okay, but we're teaching Generation Z, right? So Generation Z can't have any problems like that because they know this stuff, they're used to it. And Hungarian students, just the same. This is some fairly recent research from a study of university students at Page University about, the characteristics of Generation Z. This is from the conclusion. And we can see there the phone and the smartphone are the most popular devices. And they use them for social networking, video sharing, chat, and file sharing. So they're used to this stuff. Also, while they do still use what's called classical forms of mass media, they use them in very different ways, usually as background media noise. And some forms of traditional media are more or less out of use, like newspapers and magazines. Sorry about this rather bad translation. That's my translation of the original Hungarian text. So essentially, Hungarian students are no different to any other developed nation in the way Generation Z students behave. However, this is my own research here. Very recent research that I've done on the experiences, the online experiences of LTES students. And this was the third question that I asked in the questionnaire I used, which just asked the students to share some key adjectives describing their experience. And yeah, these are the kind of adjectives that they used: hard, lazy, scattered, a lot, stressful, strange, alienated, lonely, busy, hectic, precisely organized, or alternatively, isolated, disconnected, unsociable, sometimes organized. That's interesting. It shows different viewpoints. So even though we are teaching Generation Z, that doesn't mean they find it any easier than we do to communicate online. And so it's important because nowadays, in the future, we're going to be doing more and more stuff online. So if our students are going to go to universities, especially foreign universities, they're going to be doing entrance interviews online. They already are. And they're going to be doing some of their seminars and lectures online. In work, as we've already seen, meetings, but also job interviews, presentations, these are going to be online. The world of work has changed fundamentally, and it isn't going to change back completely, if at all. And also in their personal lives. I mean, this is not new, but we're going to be doing it a lot more now, talking to our friends and family online. So this stuff is very important. So the kind of communication skills that our students need are the same as for face-to-face, but some parts are even more important. And taking some points from the Common European Frame of Reference, which is what all the exams, all the oral exams that our students will do are based on descriptors from the Common European Frame of Reference. So for interaction, the descriptor mentions the following things, and these are all to do really with with communication strategies, particularly with these strategic kind of strategies. So being able to take the floor, that's even more difficult online, of course. Cooperating, asking for clarification, which I spelt wrongly, oh dear me. Planning what you're going to say. Compensating when you meet a communication problem. For instance, if you can't think of a word. And monitoring and repair of what you say yourself. So all of these are even more important online. Now, how can we help our students to do the kind of online tests that they're going to meet? This is the B2 exam format that we have at Euroexam. So we begin with a sort of short personal interview where the student is asked one or two questions like, are you a sporty person? These kind of general topics. There's then a picture story, a picture story, which the student has a few minutes to look at and to prepare, and then they have to narrate the story. The third part are transactional dialogues, so these kind of role play interactions in different situations, so functional language. And then the last part is a discussion with their partner, so they do it in pairs. So this is what we use at Euroexam, and the online exams are an accurate version of the sorry, I'm getting a bit lost. So they're an authentic version of the face-to-face exams, which is good. And so they have a positive washback effect as well. So they mimic the face-to-face. Not all spoken exams actually involve authentic communication. That's important to point out, but ours do. So what can we do as teachers to help our students? Obviously, for me, I've been doing this for months and months now. If you are a school teacher, at the moment, you're probably having face-to-face classes, but how much longer that will last is anybody's guess. So I'm going to talk about Zoom. I'm going to take Zoom as an example because I think for online teaching, Zoom is the best for one or two reasons. One is that the speaker view is very useful on Zoom. It enables us to see who's speaking in a large picture. That helps a lot. Another is that unlike Teams, which you may be familiar with, you can see everybody in gallery view. That's important as well. And another reason is the breakout rooms. Now, the breakout rooms in Zoom are superb. They're very flexible. They're very easy to use, very quick. We can use them to distribute the students randomly, but we can also select who we want in which room. They are much easier to use than the equivalent in Teams. So if you have the ability to use Zoom, that's very good. Now, a few ideas for activities that we can do to practice, to help our students practice in their online communication skills. Now, even if you're still teaching face-to-face, there's no reason why you can't do online practice either in your classroom or in a computer room, or maybe for homework. You can do it. You can have online sessions. Just a Minute is a great radio game. It's a fluency game. It's good fun as well, which is useful. And basically, it's just talking for 60 minutes on a topic. So your student gets a topic, and they have to talk for 60 seconds without without hesitating, deviating from the topic, or repeating anything that they say. So that's a good fun game, and I think it can work very well online as well. You can either do it in small groups, in breakout rooms, or in the whole group. Another activity is sort of puzzle solving, logic tasks, these sort of things. I think this can also work very well online. This is one of the first activities that I did when I started teaching in Hungary, actually. I can still remember it. And this is based on the idea, the scenario that you've crashed in the desert and you have to survive until help comes, and you have certain objects. So this is the description. It's a classic communicative activity. You have a list of objects and you can only choose 7. So you have to choose 7 in order, and you have to explain why you chose them. So it's a good cooperative task. And I took it from an early edition of Jeremy Harmer's book, Language Teaching. So this one could work quite nicely. Put everybody in, maybe 4 breakout rooms, 3 or 4 breakout rooms. They all have to discuss it, reach a decision, and then come back and explain what they chose and why, each group. Okay, fishbowl discussions is another one. Now, this works quite well in a classroom as well. You have people in the middle who are discussing a topic, and the rest of the students are watching them around the outside. And you can have lots of different variations. So you can have a free seat, a student can come into the discussion, another student has to leave, and so on. But this can work really well online because you can use the camera function. So the student in the fishbowl have their cameras on, all the other students have their cameras off. So it works really, really nicely online. Different sorts of debates can also work well with online work, preparing our students. Informal debates, such as balloon debates, where your students have to decide who's going to be thrown out of the balloon because it's losing air, and they adopt a famous person and have to explain why that person should be left in the balloon. Or formal debates on an issue where there is a pro side and a contra side. So they could be put in 2 different breakout rooms to prepare their arguments, then they come back together and do the debate. and each person has a role within that debate. So this is good for communication skills. And if they do a C1 exam, they may well have a discussion where there's a kind of debate as well. And role plays are very good for functional language. So if we give our students a situation where they have to go to a shop, and in this case, a bric-a-brac shop, and we give them a little frame, starting the conversation and finishing the conversation, and then they have to create a role play. And then maybe they come back and do that for the group. We can also help them with their interviews by role-playing interviews. And again, this can be done, this can help raise students' awareness, because some of them can work on preparing for the interview, others will be the interviewers, and then they can come back and do the interview. One more idea is short presentations. We can do this on topics like advantages and disadvantages of online education. One advantage of which, let me mention, is that you can record your whatever the activity is. If it's a presentation, you can record it and then you can give feedback. But we can also use fun topics as well: how to eat an apple, how to survive the zombie apocalypse. And wrapping up, because I can see I'm running out of time, we also need to think about, if we want to help our students, giving good feedback. So these are the criteria that we use in our exam. So we look at range and accuracy of the language, we look at fluency and coherence, we look at pronunciation, and we look at communication strategies, how well they use communication strategies. And creating criteria can be very good practice for your students as well. So criteria are good to use because it helps you be more objective. It helps you focus on certain features. It provides your students with better feedback, but it can also help your students if you involve them in designing the rubric for feedback and raise their awareness. And nowadays you can find online rubric creation tools, so you can very easily set this as a task for your students to do if you give them a little bit of help, and they can even focus on evaluating each other and how well they performed. Okay, so I'm going to stop there in order to allow a few minutes in case you have any questions or comments you would like to make. If nobody has a question, maybe I'll see you in the Euroexam Cafe, but thank you very much for your attention. And I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope you've enjoyed the whole conference.